Hello BookTube, my name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Yeah, I've got no rhythm. Today I'm coming to you from a room in my office that I didn't know that I had access to. It is a fully soundproofed, specially dedicated podcasting room. Who knew? So I've got the laptop on a swivel chair. I will take you on a tour of the room. We have over here a fully kitted out with fancy microphones and mic guards and a sound mixing set, everything you need to make professional sounding podcasts. I don't know how to use any of that stuff. All the way around here we have this spectacular gaming computer. Look at the size of that screen. Would not know what to do with that. And that takes you all the way back round to me, where I'm sitting on a very low-tech green sofa. Okay, a couple of things going on worth mentioning. I have booked tickets, or we have booked tickets. The entire family were going to New York for the week of Christmas. My wife's nephew is getting married over there, so we're all going. My son and his wife are coming. My other son is coming, and his girlfriend who's away in South America at the moment is hopefully joining us. My daughter's coming. Her boyfriend is not going to come because dates don't work out for him. But we're all going to be in New York, so that'll be fun with the whole family planning a night out there. We've got the wedding where all the family from all over the place are going to be in town, and should be a fun ride. And I will be ordering books. I think New Year's, I think we're going to be in Connecticut. My friends in Connecticut, and I'll be ordering books between now and then and sending them to their home in Connecticut. And then in January, I think the second week in January, I need to check the dates, I'm going to be in London again for a week, visiting my mum. And what I'd love to do there, and I'm just floating this idea, if anyone is interested, please write to me at guiltyfeet@gmail.com to see if maybe we can get a meetup going for London-based booktubers. I would love to meet some of the people in whose company I spend time every week. Mark Nash and Bob the Bookerer and anyone else, and anyone they know they've made contact with who is in London and would like to get together for a beverage one evening, either hot or alcoholic. I think that would be a good time. So let me know if there's interest, and as I get closer, I'll if people are interested, I'll work out exactly what dates I'm available that week. But I would love one night in London. I think that would be fun. So let's put that there in the future. And I want to talk about an article that I read, but it was really an article about an article. So the original article was in the Sunday Times, and is at thetimes.co.uk, and it's behind a paywall, and I will put a link to that below. And it was an interview with Elizabeth Strout. Interview is bylined by a chap called Brian Appleyard, and I want to read the exact title of the article, and it is as follows. Elizabeth Strout warns of the dangers of women writers dominating fiction. The dangers of women writers dominating fiction. Okay, what little I know of the way journalists function and the way articles are headlined would suggest to me that this was not what Elizabeth Strout got out of bed that morning and decided that she wanted to announce during her interview. I'm guessing that this came up as part of a conversation about something, and either the journalist himself, either Brian Appleyard himself, or some overzealous sub-editor looking for a sort of a more clickbaity and more meaty hook for the article has come out with this idea that Elizabeth Strout commenting on the dangers of women writers dominating fiction, and that's become an article. Now, as I say, that article's behind a paywall. I'll link to it if you have access to the Times, or if you have another way of reading it, you can actually read the original article. All I could read then was another article in the Daily Mail talking about this article, and there's a suggestion that it created a Twitter furore. That article is by a chap called Boris Starling, who is himself a novelist. He was actually in university, did my postgrad with Boris Starling in journalism. So this is immediately after finishing college, my undergraduate. We both did this journalism course at City University. Also Jojo Moyes, the international best-selling novelist, was also on that course, and some other people who've gone in and had careers in journalism or writers. They were all hugely talented people, and I blagged my way into the course for a year. Anyway, so I met Boris Starling back in 1992. He would have no idea who I am, I'm sure. And he wrote, I think, a book called Messiah back in the 90s, which was a sort of international emotional thriller, and I think did quite well and got made into a BBC TV series with Ken Stott, the great Ken Stott. And he's written some non-fiction and all sorts of things there. So he wrote an article in the Daily Mail talking about this article in the Times. And his article is headlined, I will link to this below, "Why Male Authors Are Being Written Out of Fiction." Remember, the dangers of women writers and male authors are being written out of fiction. As a female writer sparks a storm by saying too many novels are penned by women. Did she really say that? Did Elizabeth Strout really say too many novels are written by women? Best-selling writer Boris Starling examines the changing literary landscape. Okay, leaving aside the clickbaitness of the headlines, I want to talk a little bit about the idea here. Let's look at some of the people Starling name checks in the article, and I will let you decide if you think male authors we're in danger of women authors dominating fiction, and if male authors are in trouble. Let's have a look at this article. So he talks about, in terms of the female authors, he talks about Sally Rooney. Certainly, it was a huge buzz about her new book and financial success because it sold so many copies. He talks also about Brit Bennett. For some reason, I'm not sure how many copies she sold, but talks about Hilary Mantel in the same breath. Hilary Mantel and E.L. James. So in the same breath, we get Wolf Hall and 50 Shades of Grey. And he calls them queens of the blockbuster. I'm not sure either of them would care to be listed alongside the other. Even though he's saying, oh yes, and the dangers of women-dominated fiction. Oh, and by the way, the current top 3 spots in the fiction bestseller lists are Richard Osman, John le Carré, and Jeffrey Archer. But leaving that aside, and this is a quote, "The truth is that up-and-coming male novelists are few and far between." Really. In Britain, for example, there are few obvious successors to the famed quartet of Martin Amis, Julian Barnes, Ian McEwan, Salman Rushdie. Okay, all great writers. I've read each of them. Less Julian Barnes, but I'm a big fan of Amos McEwan and Salman Rushdie. All men of an age. I think, not speaking out of school to suggest that I think they're all in their 70s. And so I guess coming towards the end, or in the twilight years of literary careers, and the suggestion there are few obvious successors. Well, okay, so that may be true. I can think of David Mitchell, perhaps, is the only author, so her generation below that. So David Mitchell, I think, is my age, so early 50s, so 20 years younger than that famed quartet, as Starling calls them. Other than David Mitchell, who else is there? I've got some names, I guess, but none of whom are must-reads for me in the way that Amos and McEwan and Salman Rushdie at least are. Barnes less so for me. He says the same is true in America. The space that was once occupied by Saul Bellow, Norman Mailer, Philip Roth and John Updike, all now passed on. I haven't read much Bellow, but I've read Mailer, Roth and Updike. It's more, not in full depth, but a handful, more than a handful of books by each. And it suggests that only Franzen occupies the same space that those authors did formerly. And then he quotes former Booker Prize winner John Banville, who's 75, who says who recently bemoaned this current suspicion about straight white men, saying, "I would not like to be starting out now. Certainly it is very difficult." Well, given that I don't think there's a time in history where it's been that difficult to be a straight white man, I'm struggling to empathise with old straight white men about how difficult they're projecting it might be were they to start out. And the rest of the article goes on the same. So he does pick a nice selection, what he does do, and I wanted to shout out these names because some of them are not familiar to me at all. Starling picks out a selection of modern, he calls them, my pick of modern bloke lit. Again, this may not be Boris Starling's words, this may be the sub-editor. This is a sidebar on the article, which you can see, which is the sidebar is headed my pick of modern bloke lit. Again, not sure that was Starling, but Douglas Stewart he picks out for who won the Booker Prize last year for Shuggie Bain, which I haven't read, and then he picks Max Porter. I read both Grief is a Thing with Feathers and Lanny, which I thought were both terrific, and then 3 authors with whom I'm not familiar at all: Sam Byers and Ross Raisin and James Scudamore. So, yeah. if you know anything, or you can make a recommendation to me about a key way entry point for Sam Byers, Ross Raisin, I've never even heard that name, and James Scudamore, that sounds like a name I should have heard. Sam Byers sounds like something I must have seen somewhere, but couldn't name a book by either of them. If you've got entry points for either of those three, I'd love to hear it. I don't think any of these stories have much merit beyond the clickbait, but I will add links to both so you can see exactly what Elizabeth Strout had to say, and then what Boris Starling made of it in the Daily Mail. Okay, let's talk about the books I've read this week. The first one I finished, I already spoken a little bit about in the last video I made about books in translation. So this is Havana Blue by Leonardo Padura, translated from the Spanish by Peter Bush. Padura is a Cuban writer, and this is the first in a detective series called the Havana Quartet, and they're each Havana. This is Havana Blue, and the other one's a Havana some follow-up colour. This wasn't great for me, and I spoke a little bit about how I think that the translation itself was kind of weak. There's a bit, and the reason why I'm blaming the translator rather than as much as the novel, I think the novel is flawed. I think it's tropey, and which is fine. That's why I read new detective fiction to because I want to be in a recognizable world, but I don't think this was adding anything particularly new. I think the only real twist was that there wasn't a twist. General, okay, spoilers for this thing. Stop listening now for the next 2 minutes if you don't want to hear. In general, one expects when there is a femme fatale with whom the protagonist, the detective, gets involved, one expects in noir fiction that the femme fatale will somehow be involved in the criminal activity. And in this book, even though she's the wife of the missing person, turns out she has nothing to do with his disappearance and at all. And the detective just sleeps with her because he always wanted to. It was a bit weak. But the things that I liked about this, I want to read right from the very, very end of this book. So the very last paragraph just jumped out at me, and I loved it. So the author, the detective, having solved the crime, settles down. He abandoned his empty cup on a night table stained by the other abandoned cups, and went over to the mountains of books waiting their turn. He slid his finger down their spines, looked for a title or author that attracted him, but gave up halfway. He stretched out a hand towards his bookcase and picked out the only book that had never accumulated dust. "May it be very squalid and moving," he repeated loudly, and read the story of a man who knew all the secrets of the banana fish, which is maybe why he killed himself and fell asleep thinking the story was pure squalor, if only because of the quiet brilliance of the suicide. That is just a beautiful, beautiful paragraph, and that may be skill of the translator as well. Just a tiny section that's not in keeping with the rest of it. There's a lot of talk about popular culture but what the records they like listening to. This is a little thing, a reference to J.D. Salinger, and again, spoiler if you don't know what the banana fish reference and the suicide reference is to. Apologies, I've spoken about that story, A Perfect Day for Banana Fish, before, and the impact it had on my life when I read it and continues to have. And that was just an exquisite ending. But then there's also a bit just earlier than this where he or the translator makes the most terrible mistake. 1 second. Yeah. So they're picking out what records to play, and he says, they're going through, what do you fancy? The Beatles, Chicago, blah, blah. Creedence? Creedence, they concurred, and listened to Tom Fogerty's rich voice and the guitars of Creedence Clearwater Revival. And then there's a comment on Tom Fogerty's singing. So, first of all, Creedence, spelt wrong. Second of all, the singer in Creedence is John Fogerty, not Tom Fogerty, and Fogerty is spelt wrong. Now, I don't know if that's Leonardo Padura or just a lazy editor or a lazy translator, but everything about that was wrong and leapt out at me. That's not how you spell Creedence. Why Tom Fogerty? Tom Fogerty's the brother, he played guitars, but then they talk about the quality of his singing. That's John Fogerty, famously. So, it's so petty. I'm talking to you about 2 sections from the end of this book, the last paragraph, which blew me away. If I read another Padura, it'll be because of that last paragraph and that exquisite 1 sentence a breakdown of one of my favourite short stories, that just tangentially references it without naming it specifically. And if I don't read any more Paduro, it'll be because of the weak translating and this weird thing where they couldn't get John Fogerty's name right. After that, read a couple of graphic novels, the first two in the series that I just don't think I'm going to read more of. And if you've watched this show, you'll know what The Walking Dead is. This is volumes 1 and 2 of The Walking Dead, written by Robert Kirkman, who wrote the entire series. I think so. I think there are like 190 issues or thereabouts. He wrote them all, and this is 1 to 6 and 7 to 12. 1 to 6 was drawn by Tony Moore, and then every issue afterwards from 7 through to 190, wherever it finished, was drawn by Charlie Adlard. Sorry, Charlie Adlard in the middle, not Cliff Rathbone. Who isn't he in Cheers? Anyway, Cliff Thorburn. He was a snooker player. I don't know who Cliff Rathbone is. Anyway, volume 1 or 2, I kind of read them. I don't read scary stuff. I mean, I didn't kind of read them. I read both of them, and they're okay and they're good. There's a lot of stuff going on. So this is just 12 issues out of a run of 190, and a lot happens. If you've watched the TV show, things happen. And I haven't watched the TV show, but I went and looked at the pace of things in the TV show, and characters stick around a lot longer on the TV show than they do in this, where main characters are dispatched within the first 12 issues. There's a lot of dead people. It's zombie stuff, so there's a lot of dead people even before it starts, but a lot of people who were alive and not zombied at the start of this are dead and zombied by the end of these 12 issues. Good enough. There's like 30 of these things to collect, and I'm not going to do that. I picked these up both relatively cheaply. I think actually your best bet, if you want to try the series, there is a compendium of issues 1 through 49, which is going cheap. I've seen that go for under £10, or certainly under $15, and that might have been actually more bang for my buck than picking out these two. If you don't know, these are all black and white. The whole thing is black and white, so that there's no gore and blood from zombies biting you or having their heads hacked off or smashed in with hammers. That's the Tony Moore stuff, and then this is the more typical artwork of the series. This is when Charlie Adlard takes over, and there's Rick Grimes and his family, and bad things ensue, because that's what happens in zombie stuff. I read them both one after the other so that I could get them out and put them on the shelf, and I'm done with it. And after that, I read another book in translation, 2 books in translation this week, and this was the winner of the Man Booker International Prize in 2019, and this is Celestial Bodies by Joka Al-Hathi, translated from the Arabic by Marilyn Booth, and this is, I think, the first Omani author to be translated into English. I don't remember where I read that, and I have no way of verifying if that's true or not. Celestial Bodies, and this is very similar. Not very similar. Okay, so first of all, I should show that you got to love a book with a family tree at the beginning, so that you've already got smacks of 100 Years of Solitude there. You're going to have to go back. This is family, generations of families, grandparents and through to great grandchildren, and so we're going to get some kind of generational story, and there's not a lot here. This is 240 pages, so we're going to cover a lot of ground in a relatively short space of time. What you actually get is lots of very small chapters, each one telling the story of a different person in this family, sometimes going back to people and we get another part of their story, and these stories can be from different generations, so some taking place in the here and now, some taking place when someone who's a grown-up person now is a baby or just being born, or is a small child, and then we get the story of their parents or the people who lived in the household of this one small village in Oman. So this is away from the big city. I think the place is called Alawafi, and the people that leave there go to the big city of Muscat, which I believe is the capital of Oman. Or I'm just proudly displaying my ignorance here. And it's a very short chapters, some little as 2 pages, some sort of 5 or 6 pages. So we get a constant changing of point of view. We get a bunch of different characters, a bunch of different set in different times, and over this whole thing we get this aggregative sense of a family and an extended family and different parts of the family and competing parts of the family and secrets that the family has held and dreams that some have had, but because of the times or because of the culture, really interesting stuff. I guess another touch point, 100 Years of Solitude would be a touch point for anybody, I guess. I think another touch point for this would be Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club, where we got different stories of different families in through different generations, mother and daughter. I think in many cases, though, it's been 30 plus years since I read that wonderful book. So yeah, all juicy goodness here. So part of the reason it was so accessible is because it's bitty, because each one could function as a sort of kind of standalone short story, but forming part of this whole thing. So we get this sort of panoramic view of life in this village and who got married off to who and who was who had slaves and what happened after the decree was slavery was banned, what happened to the people who were slaves, what are the people who used to have slaves, and the relationship between those people that kind of plays out from different people's point of view. So all in all, I think this was a terrific read, very accessible, and I would definitely recommend Celestial Bodies by Joka Al-Hathi. And apologies if I'm butchering that name. So translated from the Arabic by Marilyn Booth, and this was good. So this one in 2019, 2020, the international prize I think was that Discomfort of Evening, which I have, but I've heard so many things about what a tough read it is, and there are many ugly aspects of it that I kind of pushed it to the bottom of my TBR, but I will get to that because it's nice when you have a successful read, and I've never read anything by an Omani author before. I'm not sure there's ever been anything to read before by an Omani author, and I would recommend this, Celestial Bodies. And after that, finally, on the 29th of October, I'm starting Victober, 2 days to go, and I'm going to read next Elizabeth Gaskell's Cranford and Cousin Phyllis. I've got this both, I think Cranford is 200 pages and Cousin Phyllis is 100 pages, and I've got notes here and an introduction, and I'm quite looking forward to that. I've only read one, so I bought this year, and I've got this lovely the old style of the Penguin Classic, my preferred Penguin Classic style. The only other Gaskell that I've read, I've never read any of her novels. This will be my first one, but I did read years ago The Life of Charlotte Bronte. This was back when I was big into the Brontes. So I've got, what I love about this, I've got the same edition, even though this is supposed to be a red band here, and that is faded. That's how faded. But look, first of all, you could not tell the difference between the condition of these things. And this I bought in June 2021, and this I bought in August 1995, and I love that. I believe I read this. I don't think I could tell you much about the reading experience, or probably not very much about the life of Charlotte Bronte. I guess anything I know at all about Bramwell, I think comes from this, but I don't remember. I was going through a Bronte stage. Once I'd read all the everything by Charlotte, and Emily's only Wuthering Heights, but I read Anne's books as well. And then I thought, well, yes, Daniel, you're a Bronte fan. You should read this. So I did. I don't remember much about it at all. I love the fact that it's going to sit on the shelf now with some Gaskell that I'm reading 25 years later, and maybe if I have everyone's raving about Gaskell's fiction, and so there's more to explore after I get through these, and I doubt I'm going to get to them in Victober. I probably will get to finish this over the weekend, and so I'll have one Victorian novel under my belt for Victober, but I do have a couple other Victorian novels on the shelf, which I will get to maybe before the end of the year. I've got a George Gissing, I've got the next Trollope from the Palliser novels that I really want to get to, which is Phineas Redux. So anyway, that's my story for this week. Looking forward to this weekend. Have a great weekend. If anyone is interested in sort of formalising and arranging and actually putting some dates around a meetup in London in January for booktubers, let me know, because I think that would be fun. Take care. God bless. Bye.